Are you a real estate investor looking to sharpen your skills or a newbie looking to become one? You're in the right place. Welcome to Where Should I Invest? Real Estate Investing in Canada with your host, Sarah Larby.
Welcome back to another episode, and I hope you are having a great day. I'm Sarah Larby, and today's guest is Colton Lukey, who is a 28-year-old real estate investor and world traveler. And we have a great conversation about how he started out. And he started out back in 2016 at the age of 24. We talk about discipline, frugality, how he was holding 3 jobs at a time to accumulate enough for the down payments. And his initial properties and initial strategies were bungalow conversions. But today he's also doing a lot of joint ventures, some international land development stuff, which is pretty cool. And we talk about team, having a good team of experts in place and who you would need. So I hope you guys enjoy this podcast. And if you haven't left, please leave a rating and a review. That would be amazing. Thanks for tuning in again this week, and see you next week. Let's bring in Colton. Colton, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, Sarah. Thank you very much for having me. I'm doing well. Yourself?
Good. I'm happy to have you on. So tell us, 30,000 foot view, who you are, and give us a little bit of what your real estate portfolio consists of today.
Sure thing. So I'm a 28-year-old real estate investor in the Niagara region. I started back in 2016. Since then, I sold a couple, but acquired 15 total units consisting of 7 buildings. And then recently I've also scaled out to buy a couple international plots of land with some investment partners. Still working a full-time job, and then also traveling the world as much as I can to see new places.
Very cool. And just out of curiosity, where did you buy the land?
So the land is in Belize.
Very nice. All right.
Yeah.
The place that you'd likely want to, visit quite a few times a year.
That's the plan. Yeah. Maybe put a couple properties on there and then just zip out whenever I can.
Awesome. So let's take a step back. So you've got 15 units over not a very long time. So you've scaled pretty quickly. How did you get started originally in buying your first deal, or even just in wanting to invest in real estate?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've always been interested in investing. Since I was a young age, I had my first stock account at 16 that my father helped me open. But real estate really piqued my interest around the age of 18, 19 when I was talking to a professor. And he said, if you want to buy a house, the smart thing to do is buy a house where you can also put a basement apartment in and rent it out so the tenants can pay your mortgage and whatever else. And I was like, oh, that's really something. I think you're onto something here. And within a short period of time, working multiple jobs, saving up money, I was able to purchase my first property in 2016. It was a 1970s bungalow in Welland, Ontario, and a lot of sweat equity went into that one to put a basement apartment in. Lived in the basement apartment for 2 years, rented out the upstairs, so I was living for free, and then refinanced that money and was able to take that money and put into something else with a friend of mine, and then we just kind of kept repeating the process. And since then, I've done a couple more acquisitions with the joint ventures. I've been silent partners, and I've also acquired a few more on my own.
Very cool. I like Welland's potential and willingness to work with investors as well. It's great. So especially for conversions.
Yes, it's definitely one of the easiest cities, in my opinion, my experience to work with.
Absolutely. So you've only been doing this for 4 years, and you've scaled really quickly. What are some of the key things that you think helped you get to where you are today so quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the main things is discipline, really focusing on the goal, which for me is to eventually get to financial freedom. So I don't have to work the 9 to 5 until I'm 65, the traditional route. So I stayed laser focused. I was extremely frugal. I saved every penny I possibly could, but I didn't just save it. I also invested it to try and make 4 or 5 or 6% with dividend stocks or just high interest savings accounts, and working. Honestly, at one point I had 3 jobs, and I was just banking every single penny I could. And I would just use that towards the next down payment. And then as soon as you get that first one and you learn about real estate and you learn about how equity works and refinance works, it becomes a lot easier. And then you just take that money out and you just keep repeating it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it sounds a lot like how in the beginning we got started too, and we, I had 2 jobs. I cashed out my vacation as commission, so that I can utilize that money to buy. And then, ironically, and I don't know if it was the same thing for you, but we were first going to the bank to get these properties before working with a mortgage broker. And the bank is not going to be like, oh, well, why don't you just like refinance this one and use the equity for your next one? They don't help you with planning. So I don't know what what you found and how your journey started, but, did you go directly to the bank? Did you work with a mortgage broker to start?
Yeah, of course. That's a really good point. Like most people, I went with the same bank that my parents got their mortgage at, that they were at for their entire life, and that I had a savings account with since I was 12 years old. And I just thought that was the way, right? Hey, it's a bank. They do everything the same, just like every other bank. It wasn't until about my 3rd deal when I started working with an actual mortgage broker. And that's when things really begin to scale, because he was a real estate investor himself. And he knew the ins and outs. He knew how everything worked. He knew what my goal was. So his goal was to get me to my financial freedom goal as soon as possible. And that is a great tip, is don't necessarily just go with the bank you've been with your entire life. Definitely build a relationship with a mortgage broker, because the biggest difference is they have access to hundreds of lenders with hundreds of different rules and criteria, where let's say BMO has one set of rules, one set of criteria. So that's definitely a great tip. Thank you for bringing that up.
And they work for you too, right? You're not going to get somebody that's essentially working for the bank trying to sell you like mortgage insurance because they make a commission off of that and that kind of stuff, right? So, I'm a big proponent of like, just don't bother going to the bank yourself, and, work with a mortgage broker, build that relationship, have them work for you and help you scale in order not to hit the financing wall before you need to. So, so obviously you've got, the 15 doors, you've got some on your own and some with joint ventures. Why did you decide to go the joint venture route at that point?
It's perfect segue for this, because I was working with that one bank, and they said, you can only afford to buy this amount of worth of house. Not being an extremely high earner, I had no chance of buying a house. So I decided to partner with my real estate agent, who is also a good friend of mine, who's also an investor. And we purchased a property together, and it just gave me, it was a simple 50-50 joint ventureship, 50-50 down payment, renovation costs, everything like that. So I was kind of forced into doing it, which necessarily isn't a bad thing, because I learned very early the importance of partnerships and how you can use joint ventureships to scale your portfolio even faster. When I originally got started, it was, okay, I can buy maybe 4 or 5, 6 on my own. Being young and naive, but you quickly realize that, okay, well, it's a lot easier to have multiple partners, not necessarily multiple partners, but 1 or 2 or 3 that you really just work with and focus on. But now I realize that if I would have worked with a mortgage broker, I probably could have gotten another 3 or 4 on my own. But nonetheless, it's in hindsight, I still own these properties. We're still cash flowing really well, and they're appreciating in value.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's pros and cons, right? To scaling with JVs or to scaling without JVs, because, yes, you can maybe scale a little bit faster, regardless, whether you would have gone the mortgage broker route or not. But the other downside is now you're splitting all the profits. You've got some exit strategy at some point, right? Chances are you're not going to have that property with the same JV for 20 years. I mean, maybe, but chances are something will happen at some point and somebody will need to sell, or somebody will want to, liquidate or something along those lines. So, just keep that in mind. And, listeners, when you're working with a joint venture partner, just ensure that you're on the same page and that there's some type of exit strategy, because at some point you will want to, utilize that to, move on to the next deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing for your listeners, is always have a clause in there where, like, my joint ventures and I, this is the clause for the next 5 years, right? So 5 years, we're holding this property indefinitely. We're cash flowing, we're refinancing it, we're getting all our money out. In 5 years, we'll revisit. depending if the markets appreciate crazy like it has, maybe we'll sell it and take some gain off and take some capital back, or we might just refinance a little bit more in the future and hang on to it. So kind of having a shotgun clause with your joint ventures is extremely important. And make sure, like you said, you're always on the same page, regardless of who it is, family or not, be on the same page, have it in writing.
Yeah, absolutely. Great insight. So what about the property management standpoint? Like, how did you guys divide that with the JVs and or even your own, if it's any different?
Yeah, so kind of how we do it, most of my JVs are with duplexes. So I'll get one tenant and he'll get the other tenant.
Oh, well, it's really like a 50-50 split.
Yeah, or, because one thing I mentioned earlier is I travel a lot. My fiance and I, we travel 6-7 weeks out of the year. So do some of my joint venture partners. So when that's the case, it's just figuring out what works best, right? Hey, I'm going to be gone for 3 weeks. Do you mind holding this prop, or do you mind taking all the calls, or whatever? Yeah, no problem, because he knows that I'll do the same for him. So that's kind of how we did it. And it works, right? It's each get one tenant, each sharing the responsibilities. We found that that's the best way to do it, and it's worked.
Okay. Well, like you said, as long as it's working and everyone's on the same page and continues to be on the same page, right?
Yeah. And again, it really depends how you structure your joint ventureships too, right? Like these are straight 50-50. So we split everything. Mm-hmm. If you're 100% money partner, chances are you're taking 100% of the responsibility, right? So if someone's giving you $100,000 to invest, they don't want the headaches of tenants. So you're taking on that full responsibility. So again, it all depends with what the agreement really is.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes you might just decide to hire a property manager, right, when your portfolio gets big enough, or maybe just, it makes sense to do it from the start. I mean, personally, I manage my own, and it sounds like you're managing your own, but now do you work your cash flow numbers knowing that at one point you may decide to hire a property manager out when you're running your numbers?
Yeah. So I always factor in about a 10% property management fee in there. And then the 10% that's, since I do property manage everything myself now, I just keep that tucked away for a emergency fund, right? Repairs and stuff like that. Just be safe. But yeah, when I do, I calculate everything: repairs, vacancy, property management costs, stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. That sounds good. So, in terms of next steps for you and your goals, I mean, you're still working full time. Like, have you planned out, just a roadmap to how many more units you have, or how much, more you need to do, or time wise, in order to be able to get to your goals? Do you have an idea of what that looks like?
Yeah. So I always said that by the age of 30, I would like to be able to retire, quote unquote, retire. I could do that now, and pre-COVID, I was seriously considering it. But then when I got the work from home order, that really changed things, because I'm able to get everything I can done at home, but I'm also able to focus on my business a little bit more. And it's made things a lot easier. And since COVID, I've been able to acquire 2 more properties and a couple of land purchases internationally. So I'm kind of on the fence. I would still like to keep working until the bank says, you know what, we can't give you any more mortgages.
Yeah.
Then to me, the job doesn't seem needed as much, right? Because I'm already technically financial free on a number standpoint. But in terms of getting mortgages, I would like to get a couple more personally in my name. So I'm going to try and stretch it out for at least another year or two, and see what happens.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just left and AK retired from my job October 1st.
Congrats.
And thank you. And that was the biggest thing, right? It was figuring out the financing piece and getting what I needed to refi before I made the leap, and just acquiring that, last property that I could. And so it doesn't mean I'm going to stop buying. It just now means that I'm either going to be focusing more on those joint ventures, or going into the, commercial residential. So 5 or more units, or mixed use or whatnot. So there's always the ability to keep scaling. The property type may change a little bit. And it sounds like you're doing the BRRRR strategy as well, which is by far my favorite. It allows you to recycle the money and keep doing it. What do you recommend for, somebody that might just be starting out, like in terms of, guiding them to either a strategy? I mean, I know it depends on a lot of people, but like, what's your take on it?
Yeah, so if their goal was similar to mine in terms of trying to get financial freedom as soon as possible, so really building strong cash flow, and then if you don't come from a lot of money, you need that refinance money to happen. Most people that are starting out are not probably going to have 20% down. So you're probably going to go to traditional 5 or 10%. So when you buy your first property, you really have to get the best deal possible because you're dependent on getting that refinance money out. And if you're only putting 5% down, chances are you're probably going to be waiting a couple of years to be able to refinance because there's be enough equity. Now, of course, it all depends with what happens because we've seen 30% appreciation per year in Niagara in the last 3 years. So, but the goal is honestly try and find the best property possible. And what I'm starting to do more and more is look for off market. If there's an area that you want to buy in, become an expert in that area, become an expert in that neighborhood. I literally door knock neighbors. So like I'll go around and, hey, I'm Colton, I'm a local investor, I'm looking to buy your property. Regardless if it's for sale or not, here's my number. If you know anybody, I'll give you $1,000. And what you're doing is you're building a presence in that neighborhood. And very quickly, you're going to find out that John and Sally are getting divorced and they're going to need to sell their home. Or, you know, this person's dad or mother passed away, unfortunately, they're going to need to sell their home. And you can be a solution to those people's problems, right? They need to sell the house. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. Last thing they want to worry about is a whole bunch of people going through their house. You can find out who they are, go leave a card or go knock on their door, and you could potentially get a property for a good deal. So one piece of advice is go out of your comfort zone and start door knocking and start talking with individuals and build up a presence in a neighborhood that you like.
Yeah, I mean, that's great advice for sure. So how many of your properties did you get off market doing that strategy?
So I just started doing this strategy, but the one that I recently purchased was on market and it wasn't. It was on market for a very long time. They were going to take it off. And I ended up door knocking and I got the deal and it was sitting on the MLS.
Cool.
Right. And tons of people passed it up for whatever reason. And I guess got lucky. But awesome. What I'm doing now is I do have a list of 3 or 4 properties where people are potentially interested in selling. So what I do is every month I'll follow up with those people, right? And sooner or later, one of them should bite.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's just like a sales funnel, right? You've got to cultivate it, and they may not be ready to go right away, but you know, enough touches at some point, you'll be on top of their mind for when they're ready to go.
For sure. And I'm sure just like you're in your area, you probably see "We Buy Houses" signs everywhere. Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of people aren't going to call those because they think it's a scam or whoever it is. But if you build a relationship, especially in a couple of neighborhoods, and you become known, it's more likely that you're going to be able to get a property rather than just a sign in the ground.
And it goes back to owning in on an area, right? And just being a market expert in that area. Because, you know, if you didn't, so what, I guess it's in Welland that you are, but you know, if you didn't know Welland really well, like you wouldn't even know if someone's like, yeah, I want to sell it for like $350, but you know it's worth like $320 or maybe it's worth $380. So like you have you have to have a good pulse on that market as well. Because if you're just door knocking to door knock and you don't have a good idea of like what the actual value of that property is, you may think you have a great deal and you may have overbought as well.
Right. And that's why the importance of a team is extremely important, right? Like having a good investor focused realtor, regardless if you buy the property on the MLS off them or not, they should be willing to help you. So you can easily get that information from a good realtor. They'll be able to tell you exactly how much properties have sold for in what areas. And that's something I get like reports of that every couple months just to see, right? Well, houses are now going for an extra 40 grand more in that neighborhood, right? So you just know. But again, it comes down to the team and a good realtor.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big believer in that. I'm a big believer in building your team as well. Who are some of the key team members you think every investor should have?
Number one, you got to have a really good real estate agent that's investor focused. Not just the one that mom and dad use, investor focused, 100%, because you want to get to where they are eventually if they have multiple properties. Number two, mortgage broker. You got to have an experienced mortgage broker that specializes in rental properties. So they know the ins and outs, they know which banks to use. And then three, I would say a network of like-minded individuals. So it can be a mentor, it could just be a couple of people you've met through local meetups. Being around like-minded individuals really opens up your mindset and really shows you how quickly, or that you can get tips on how quickly to build a portfolio. And that's one thing I want to say is thank you for having the Right Club, because I met so many like-minded individuals there. And when I started going to the Right Club, I was able to get so much more knowledge from and learn ins and outs from like-minded individuals. And I grew my portfolio by 4 properties in a year.
That's
right.
awesome.
And that was just attending 2 or 3 Right Clubs. And I met people in Niagara, and we ended up starting our own kind of once a month meetup.
Cool.
So thank you for that. I want to tell you that, because if you guys are, once we get back to normal, and the Right Club is back in session in terms of face-to-face, 100% everyone needs to attend it, because it was a great seminar.
Thanks. We're still doing our online free webinars as well. I know it's not the same than being in person, of course, because you can't, network the same way, but we're still providing knowledge.
That's right.
Despite of everything.
Yeah. Make sure you guys check it out, all your listeners.
Awesome. So I want to go back for a second and go into just your JV stuff, and the template, and how somebody even goes and gets that done. How did you create your joint venture agreements? Was it you and your partner figuring it out, writing it down? Did you borrow one from the lawyers? Like, how did that all go about?
Yeah, so the first one, like I said, was with my real estate agent, friends, and investor. So we kind of just wrote everything out. This is how it's going to work, 5-year hold, 50-50 split on everything, and just kind of made a one simple page list of it. As I evolved and found another joint venture partner, that's when I then paid for a joint venture agreement. And it's 8 or 10 pages, something like that, just to be more thorough. Mm-hmm. To protect both sides. It's not just protecting yourself, but it's also protecting the joint venture partner. And it's honestly, it's a lot more, I feel a lot more safe having a legal binding agreements done up by a professional, because all your bases are covered. Like I said, regardless of who it is, if it's mom, dad, brother, sister, uncle, have a legal binding agreement, because you never know what can happen. Anything could happen. You want to make sure that you're protected as well as your joint venture. So definitely spend the money, right? It might not cost that much. Honestly, I think I'd pay less than $1,000 for my joint venture agreement, and it's worth it. And I can just keep using the same thing over and over and over again. All I do is change the property address and change the name. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely. They'll give you a template. Carson Law. So Ryan Carson has a good one as well. And he's a lawyer that's investor friendly and works predominantly with investors from the Right Club. So he's got a great one. I don't know where you got yours from as well, but definitely a good lawyer will have that handy for you. So, in terms of, you mentioned the Right Club, it's awesome that you come, but just in terms of where you get your education from, where you get your knowledge from, what are some of the things that you've been doing, aside from actually, the brick and mortar investing to, keep yourself sharp?
Yeah, for sure. So when I first got started, I was big into bigger pockets. Also, I read a ton of books. That's definitely something that changed my mindset, was dedicating time to reading, but not just reading anything, reading business-minded books, or rather it's real estate or it's just how to start a business or whatever it is. Really educating yourself and kind of, I guess, getting obsessed about what your goal is. So if your goal is real estate, read real estate investing books, read how to market, read how to sales, because all those things help you when you become a real estate investor. And then nowadays, I still watch a ton of YouTube. I still read a ton, but I also do a lot more. I try to meet with individuals, whether it's through Zoom like this, or scheduling, hey, let's go for lunch, and just getting out there, meeting new people, meeting people that are at another level that I am, right? So I'm not sure you know them, but Sean Rea is a friend of mine. He's also in Niagara region. He's way up there. And I talk a lot with him because eventually I want to get to that level, right? So reading, listening to podcasts like yours, watching YouTube, and then again, networking, getting out there, meeting new people is definitely something that's helped me a ton.
That's awesome. Now, when you first got into real estate, I mean, I know you said you had somebody that gave you that idea and started talking to you about it, but what did your friends and your family think about you know, starting to invest in real estate and then scaling to 15 doors and so quickly? You know, what was your experience like?
Yeah, they definitely, most of them thought I was crazy. Being 22, I think I was, and buying my first house, and people were like, oh, what happens if it crashes, or what happens, you know, you're gonna have tenants and they're gonna trash your place, and the typical stuff you hear. But with no risk, there's no reward, in my opinion, right? And to this day, I still have family members that think I'm crazy, that think, oh, you got so much debt. It's like, yeah, but the cash flow is paying for all the mortgages. They're appreciating in value. And even if I was to if the market for whatever was to dip 30% or 40%, I'm still okay, right? Like I'm not underwater. So you're definitely going to face that for you aspiring real estate investors. If you just got one property, you're going to get a lot of people calling you crazy. And just look past it. Honestly, they are just saying that because they're not happy where they are. And I'm a believer of that is people that are usually negative are because they're unhappy, right? They know that they're stuck in a job for the next 40 years. They have very limited savings, and don't let that get you down. And it's funny now, it's just kind of now where I'm starting to, as my YouTube's getting bigger and people are starting to see how I document my journey and how I talk about real estate, that those friends and those family members are starting to come around now. Like, oh, I wish I would have listened to you back in 2016 and all that stuff. So it's funny how it comes full circle. But you're going to get a lot of negative when you're first starting out, but you feed off that.
Yeah. And the other thing too, I mean, it could be people that want your best interest and they're just worried because of, you know, things that they've heard, but you know, like ultimately, if they're not where you want to be and they're not living the lifestyle that you want to be living, then, you know, say thanks for the advice and keep doing your thing, right? Which is exactly what you've done and how you've scaled. And that's, you know, it's just awesome to see your journey. And you mentioned YouTube and, you know, you're providing some content out there. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, for sure. So for listeners, it's just my name, Colton Lukey. And I started it about a year and 3 months ago, strictly just educational, right? People were messaging me saying, hey, how can you afford to travel so much, right? Like, what did you do? You still work 9 to 5. So that kind of gave me the idea that maybe I'll start educating people on what I do, because a lot of people think it's impossible, or, you know, they can't do it, or you got to come from money to invest in real estate. So that was my main goal, was to start a YouTube channel that was just purely educational, to show people that if an average guy like myself who doesn't come from money, is not a very high earner, can scale properties and build wealth through real estate, then pretty much anybody can. As long as, I think, if you live in North America, you have the greatest opportunity right in front of you. And it's honestly, it's given me so much reward. The feedback I'm getting is insane. I love it. People are telling me that, you know, I just bought my first property 2 months ago, thanks to you, and I'm about to refinance it and get my second one. And that's honestly all I did this for, was just to show people that, hey, if I can do it, you can do it. It's not as hard as everyone says. It's actually kind of easy once you get your first one or two. And that's all it was. It was just education, and it was amazing that people are actually getting feedback. And we just hit 700 subscribers, which was, nice. I never thought 700 people would be interested in what I say, but yeah, it's growing, and it's people seem to like it, so I'm gonna keep doing it.
Congrats. I mean, it is awesome to see Canadian content. I think that's how we originally connected. I was like watching one of the videos and I'm like, I've got to have this guy on my podcast.
Yeah, I think it was my Brew Your Way to Retirement video.
Yeah.
So for your listeners, that's the buy, renovate, rent, refinance, repeats.
My strategy is the best.
Yes, absolutely. And that's how most of us are able to scale our portfolios.
Yeah, you got to be able to reutilize your money, pull it back out and do something, keep investing it. Otherwise, it's going to be stuck in there. I mean, again, there's different strategies for different people, but in order to really scale and do this a little bit faster, you're going to have to reuse the money as much as possible. So, I mean, it's really exciting. Like you're scaling, you've got 15 doors, there's a lot of listeners out there too that might have like 5 or 6 and like, how do I get to the next one? Like, do you have any tips or insights for them on like how to really like move past that handful of properties into the next stage?
Yeah. So again, I guess if the issue is that you're not able to find deals, because I think that's an issue that a lot of people are having right now, then try and look for outside your market. Right, it's possible that you might have to go an hour or 2 away. If you've acquired 3, 4, or 5 on your own, and let's say I know people who have done that and they haven't used the BRRRR strategy, and they got $300,000 or $400,000 sitting in equity. Pull that darn money out, because you're going to pay 2% on it, and you're going to be able to reinvest it and make 20 or 30%.
And it's tax deductible.
And it's all tax deductible, right? So that is something. If you got a lot of equity sitting around, put it to work. Because it's just dead money. It's not doing anything. It's making you poorer, in my opinion, because you're just losing value in terms of inflation to the dollar. And then the other thing would be, because you hit a financing wall, experiment with a joint venture. Chances are, if you have a couple of properties, a couple of people who are also in real estate, and they might be facing the same problem you are. Or you might have a friend that wants to buy his first rental, and maybe that first rental is his first property or her first property. Experiment with joint ventures. A lot of people get scared away from joint ventures because of whatever reason. It could be risky, it could be disagreements, but that's how you're really going to scale if you hit that financing wall. So I would say those are probably the 3 best tips I could say would be to do those. And then you'll see, you'll be able to scale it from 3 to 4, 5, 6 and on.
That's awesome. Do you find that it sounds like you're really passionate about real estate and helping people also create wealth. How is your full-time employer taking your passion?
Yeah, so I made that very clear upon when I got hired that you should expect 5 good years out of me. But my goal is to be done by the time I'm 30. So that was a conversation that was had on day 1, and they still know that that's what the plan is. And I'm doing my best to stay there for the full 5 years and keep my end of the bargain up.
Now, do you influence any of your colleagues into buying any real estate?
Yeah, definitely. So one of my coworkers, she had a property, she rented it out, and now she just refinanced it. So she's able to pull out a ton of money, and she just did that last month, and she's looking for her next deal, her and her husband. So definitely, I have piqued a couple of people's interests, and then other ones, not so much. But you can only help who wants to be helped, right?
Yeah, absolutely. My when I was employed before October 1st, that was my last day, my work boss and my team, they were so amazing and they were like so supportive. My boss actually ended up getting into real estate, and I think he has like 8 of his own properties.
Wow.
That he acquired in the last like 2.5 years as well. And, it's just incredible to be able to infect others with like that mindset, in the sense, right? That like ability to like see a bigger picture, that you don't have to wait 30 years or whatever that time. You don't have to be 60 or 65 by the time you can actually leave, so I think having a support, and it sounds like you do too, having a supportive work environment and people that support that as well and trust you, because they trusted me the same, not to take the two and mix them together, right? Like, 9 to 5 is a 9 to 5. That's what, what you get hired and paid for. And then afterwards you find time to do your other things. But, I think having a good supportive work environment where you're not miserable going into work, you don't have all that stress, is really helpful as much as possible as you're scaling.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, you nailed it. I couldn't say it better myself. It's extremely important. And one thing I did want to note is, I hope that the current events that we're facing in 2020 with the pandemic, I really hope that it's opened a lot of people's eyes in terms of you shouldn't just rely on your pension. And you shouldn't just rely on one job. And I think some people in my work really realize that now, because I have gotten some private messages from those coworkers saying, what do we think about this? What do you think about that? Right. And they're just kind of trying to pique their interest in real estate. So that is the biggest thing, is that how I always said it was, I always had the question, why you invest in real estate, right? Or from coworkers. And my answer was always, because this job's not guaranteed. As much as you think it's guaranteed, it's not. Mm-hmm. And 5 million Canadians found that out very quickly, right? We had, I think it was about 5 million Canadians unemployed in a short amount of time. So if your listeners out there, if you're just hesitant about getting into real estate, regardless if it's real estate or not, find second and third sources of income, because nothing's guaranteed. Your job's not guaranteed, and your pension's not guaranteed. So build up multiple streams of income. And honestly, real estate, I'm sure Sarah can relate to this, is probably the easiest and fastest way to build up multiple streams of income and financial freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the way I picked as well, right? I was looking at because when you look and I see how you can create wealth, there's many options, but real estate just made the most amount of sense. And I'm like, a business is a whole lot of hours. Real estate, it's not that bad. Like, you're learning and you're doing a few things in the beginning in terms of getting your, all your education that you need to be able to take, action on that first one. And then you're learning throughout. But in terms of time and value, real estate is by far the best. And control. Controlled and for most part stable, right? Yeah. And the best returns, because you can invest in the stock market, but you don't get the tax write-offs. And after inflation, you might make 7%. So for real estate, you're making easily 15, 20, 25% or not more. Technically, when you do a BRRRR, you could have an infinity rate of return.
Exactly. Trying to explain that to some people is a little bit challenging, but
like a free house once you're done with it. Not always, but sometimes.
Yeah, or even if you just have, if you own a house for $15,000 and you're still making $800 a month, it's like, what? Is that possible?
No-brainer. So awesome. It was great talking to you. The next part of the podcast, we're going to do a lightning round. So I'm going to ask you a series of 5 questions. You're going to give me the first answer that comes to mind. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Question number 1. What is your favorite real estate investing book ever?
Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
All right. Question number 2. Sounds like you're a podcast listener. What is your favorite podcast?
I do listen to yours quite a bit. Recently, I've listened to Andrew Hines, Bigger Pockets, kind of all 3. I listen to all of them.
All right, cool. Number 3, what do you do for fun aside from real estate?
Travel the world, hang out with friends.
3 cool places that you've traveled. Go.
Colombia, Peru, Japan.
Nice. You're right on the lightning round.
Holy.
Quick, snappy answers. That's good. Number 4, if you lost all of your money, all your assets tomorrow, how would you start again?
Real estate investing. I would suck it up, get out there, start grinding, get a job, get financing, and just start the process all over again.
All right. Awesome. And last question, if somebody has $50,000 and they want to get started, how would you recommend they spend that money?
If you're a first-time home buyer, get a property where you can house hack. You can live in one unit, rent out the other, and live for free. Refinance that money, and you'll be in your second property in no time.
All right, very cool. Colton, where can the listeners reach out and find out more about you?
Absolutely. So you can find me on YouTube at Colton Lukey, and you can also find me on Instagram at Investor Travel Couple.
Awesome. And last, final words of advice for my listeners?
Get out there, make offers, and take action. You'll get 0 properties if you make 0 offers.
Awesome. So thanks so much for being on the show. It was great having you on, and thanks for all the insights.
Thanks for having me, Sarah. Have yourself a good day.
Thanks so much for listening to Where Should I Invest with your host, Sarah Larby. Make sure to listen in next time. We'll catch you on the next episode of Where Should I Invest?